Welcome to the lab. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz. It's good to be here. Good to see you. Thank you for making us a part of your day. And let me see here. We're going to take some calls today. And today we have a returning guest, great guest, part of the witness box, 1/3 of it. Dr. Gary Brucato in the house. How are you, Doctor?
How are you?
Good. You look nice. You look refreshed.
Refreshed. Oh, that's good.
I don't know. You look normal. You look the same. I was just trying to. I'm not good at compliments. Tried.
I slept about as long as a cicada, so
Yeah. You're not a big sleeper, are you?
Honestly, I'm not.
I don't blame you either. But anyway, so we're gonna take some callings tonight. If you want to talk about a case, maybe possibly a personal experience. However, once again, there's as a clinician, Dr. Gary cannot really advise you or give you any medication or anything like that on certain things, but also people that are affected in the areas of the hurricanes, and our thoughts go out to them. And if you guys want to call in, that would be great as well. What were you going to say, Dr. Gary?
Just to clarify, I'm a psychologist, so we never give medication. Psychiatrist, but I think it's a great point to make sure that people
sugar cubes, nothing like that. No?
I think it's important that people understand that this is not a clinical call-in thing. We can't do that. But people can call in with general true crime questions. They could talk about if they've been affected by a crime, infamous, well-known, or not known. They can talk about a case that's perplexing them. They can ask general opinions on anything criminology related. That's all fair game. But I enjoy it.
Yeah, I do too. And let me tell you, so the number, the call-in number at the bottom of the screen is 817-79. Wait, what do we got here? Was that? No, that's the wrong number, Dr. Gary. And that won't do. How's anybody going to call in? 799. That makes some more sense. 799. Let me save that here. All right. 817-799-8214 is the number to call. One of the things, we had talked a little bit earlier, I think it was last show, we were talking about the cases to kind of watch out for. And I think the Menendez brothers were brought up, and it's all the rave right now because of the new Netflix series going on.
Right.
And it sounds like that they are getting a new, I don't know if it's an evidentiary hearing, but it seems as though they are going to get some sort of new hearing where they're talking about discovered evidence or something like that in November. So that's going to be very interesting.
Well, Dr. Burgess, my research partner at Boston College, who happens to be in the Cold Case Foundation with me, and Chris McDonough, she was the expert witness for them, on the Menendez defense.
Mm.
And, so I get to discuss it regularly. We're writing actually about comparisons between the Menendez case, which really the trial began in 1993, and Lizzie Borden trial, which was exactly 100 years before. And there are an enormous number of similarities between those cases. And, in the Borden case, one of the suspicions people had, although it was never substantiated, is that, it was in some newspapers, was the possibility that even though it looked like a financial motive, that she had perhaps been abused. And that is the same sort of dilemma you have with the Menendez brothers. Was it financial elimination murder, or was it a result of some kind of acting out because of abuse and wanting to level the playing field or escape from trauma? And people like that are very different than elimination murderers. People like that don't tend to ever kill again. They escape the horrendous circumstances in which they find themselves, and then they never kill again. They just explode on the individual that's been abusing them. And of course, this new evidence that appears to have arisen, this letter that seems to provide contemporaneous evidence that there really was some kind of sexual assault, does give credence to their claim that the real motivation was abuse. And remember, the truth of the matter is they had access to so much money they didn't need to kill for money. That wasn't the problem.
Yeah.
I always thought that was a ridiculous idea. I'm much more inclined to think that there was some trauma going on there.
Seems to have been. We got our first call of the night, and we're going to go ahead and take it here. Hopefully the connection works just fine. If not, bear with me. 615, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah. Hi, this is Lisa from Minnesota.
Hello, Lisa.
Lisa is contacting us by Ouija board, I think.
Feels like.
Can you hear us? Can you? At least we kind of
feel the vibration.
It's coming to us from the great beyond. Yes, behind the curtain. So tell us.
Right. I see. Anyway.
What are you thinking about?
I was trying to make a joke. Anyway.
That's all right.
Well, I was thinking. I have a question about some maybe preventative things that could be done when you talk about impulsive murderers. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm wondering if, like, having a mandatory, like, classes for people that are in elementary school, like emotion regulation classes, or how to love and be kind to each other, like you talk about, learning manners, because a lot of children aren't getting that in their homes. Do you think that that would be something that would help as a preventative for violence? Or is that something that might not be of any use? I don't know.
Well, so Josh, is the idea that we're going to get the question and then kind of end the call and then answer so that we don't get all the static and everything? Or
yeah, well, I'm trying to. How's our delay? Is the delay okay?
I don't know. Is it 1962?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
All right, are we on? I don't know how much how long the delay is, but yeah, what we'll do is we'll just take the channel and then take the call. I'll put you on a hold and then drop the call when I have to.
All right. Well,
okay. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure. And what is the caller's name again, Josh?
Your name again?
Lisa
from Minnesota.
Well, it's a complicated question because the capacity to learn in the way that you're describing, Lisa, depends upon the degree to which the individual has a kind of narcissistic or psychopathic personality structure. If the individual is killing out of impulse, a normal human impulse that goes haywire, like jealousy or rage or wanting to escape a horrible situation or something like that. Those are things that we can all kind of understand. And those people, if you teach them frustration tolerance and you teach them kindness, how to get along with others, to have a little more theory of mind, be more empathic, so you can make a difference, I think. Where I think you'd have a harder time is when you start climbing the scale into people that kind of go from narcissistic to antisocial all the way through to sadistic. People like that are not really going to change very much. They tend to be pretty transactional. You teach them how to behave basically because if they don't behave, they're not going to get something they want, right? If you don't, clean that floor with a mop, tonight, you're not going to get cigarettes here in the jail, that kind of thing. And but don't try to teach them, in the traditional way, how to have feelings for other people and be empathic or whatever, because you're talking about people who may actually have very different brains than the rest of us in terms of limbic circuitry, frontal lobe, so forth. They don't necessarily have those same feelings of compassion or the ability to read other people normally. Much more inclined to be kind of bored and disinterested beyond using people. And I think those techniques would basically just teach more psychopathic people how to cheat you. Like if you do psychotherapy with somebody that's very psychopathic, you're often just teaching them how to fake insight. They learn from it how to mimic deep thoughts and feelings and whatever. But I wouldn't say that they're really learning from it. You're not really going to stop a psychopath by, giving them a long talk about warm and fuzzy feelings. Like, it's just not going to happen. They're going to go out and do whatever they're going to do. And in fact, in the new book I'm writing, in the opening chapter, one of the things I do right away is I start out by saying that there are certain really dark and painful realities that you'll have to face if you're going to be able to read the book. And one of them on that list is that no matter how much you want to believe that there are some people that have warm and fuzzy feelings secretly, or that with a big hug, they're suddenly going to become a nice person, or, even though they're doing horrible, heinous things, they probably once were a lovely soul. The truth of the matter is there are some people who simply enjoy killing, maiming, assaulting, abusing, using. And the scariest part of all is that they often look like the rest of us. They're just, in fact, they can even be quite likable. One of the things that has always made me sick to my stomach is how much I like some of the people that I meet who have done horrendous things, because there's a human connectivity that they can sort of fake with you, and you wind up walking away going, I actually find that guy kind of funny. He's kind of likable. And then you think about what they did, and it's horrifying. Yeah. So, but I think, that's the long answer to, I think it depends on the motive. If the motive,
and I hope that answers some of your question. And I do think
that's quite a sophisticated question, actually.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you for calling in.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
You're very welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye. Off to a good start. It was a great call.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Sure.
All right. Let's see here. We got 720. Let's see. 720. You'll hear the beeper on the air. How's it going?
Hey, Josh. How are you?
I'm well. How are you? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello. Oh, good. We got a little bit of a delay. I'm calling from Denver, Colorado.
Oh, I love that state. Beautiful state.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay, but it's okay. This visuals make sense. Haven't been around as much lately with a lot of going on in life. But I miss you a lot. I miss being in the chat. Although don't ever miss the show, though. I want you to know that.
I appreciate it.
So I have a two-part question. Part of what's been keeping me away is my family's kind of been going through their own real-life true crime drama. Wow. My great niece was killed by her mother's boyfriend in 2021. Her biological father, is my nephew. We both parties were arrested, her mother and the boyfriend. Gianna was shaken to death. She was a victim of shaken baby syndrome, and her cause of death was actually blunt force trauma. There were signs. The mom knew that she was being abused. She had bruises on her. Previously, my nephew fought tooth and nail to get the baby back. When she took off with her, he had called DSS in different counties, called the police multiple times for welfare checks, and was really frustrated because he couldn't get anything done. He finally got a call back from a DSS worker when the baby was in the hospital already on life support. They didn't take her into the hospital. They didn't take her in, and when it happened and she was showing signs, they left her all night and took her in the morning. So we had to go through 2 trials. Fast forward, we had to go through 2 trials. My nephew he's went through it, and I'm so I'm worried about him even more now, even though he seems like he's doing better. I'm more worried about him now because we went through 2 trials. The boyfriend was found guilty, and even though the evidence was there, the mom got off. And the fact that there isn't going to be full justice for Gigi, she was only 9 months old. And the fact that there isn't going to be full justice for her is something that is really, really, really damaging my nephew, our whole family, really. And I was just wondering if there was something on that note, if there's any kind of advice you could give me just to kind of help us process and move on, because there's nothing else we could do now. Things that should have been in court, whether legalities let them in or not, were left out in the mom's case that would have absolutely shown that there was a history and a pattern of abuse and failure for her to seek medical attention and to protect her daughter. And that's the part one of my question. And the part two, I've been dying to ask you for the longest time, because I started back to school myself after everything happened with Gianna. Started going back to school myself for criminal justice. And I'm really interested in finding out what kind of career choices you think would be good using these degrees, and how far you think I should go in school. I don't have it in me to go to the doctorate level, but forensic psychology, and I'm wondering, and I would love to work within the judicial system, and I'm wondering what type of careers that you think I might want to look at for that.
All right, so we're gonna tackle those questions one at a time. I'm going to mute your mic, and then we'll pick back up here in a second. So just hang tight. So the question.
Start with the first question. I'd like your thoughts.
The first question is that there was in her family, her nephews, I believe, her great niece. I believe. Let me. Is it your great niece or nephew? Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. My great niece. Her name is Gianna Rosales. In case anybody wants to look up her case, it's Justice for Gigi hashtag.
Okay. All right. So the father, or excuse me, one was found guilty. The other, we're gonna look it up right now. Not guilty. The mother. So let me get this straight. So this is again you're concerned about your nephew, right? And he is who to the baby?
Right. Her biological father. It was the mother and her boyfriend who were charged in her death.
Okay, gotcha. So the stepdad or the boyfriend, or I guess boyfriend, and biological mother charged in the death of shaking a baby. Just the awful thing that happens all too often when people either can't deal, lose their temper, or whatever. It's just a disgusting way to treat a child, and children die from it. Now, the boyfriend sounds like was convicted, and then the biological mother was not convicted because there was evidence that was not admitted by the judge, which tends to happen a lot. How does somebody deal with that? How can somebody move on from something like that? And Dr. Gary, if you want to take a shot at that, and I will as well.
Well, why don't you start? I'll give your thoughts on that, Josh.
Yeah, I think, well, my thoughts initially would be that you never get over it. It's never going to be something that'll sit right with you. Even, and I can pretty much, I would say I can pretty much guarantee that even if the mother had been found guilty and locked away, you would be like, okay, justice is served. However, there's no justice. Even when somebody gets locked away, the crime happened. It doesn't change anything other than that person's freedom is taken away. Unfortunately, if people could trade places, which they cannot, that would be ideal. But as for the justice system, is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I know that's a very generic thing to say, and it lets people down a lot. And I would advise your nephew that there are many miscarriages of justice, and unfortunately, there's really nothing that can be done about it. You do in a sense, have to move on. But, how do you do that? That's just not something that I think you can do, because, it's just going to be with you forever. But you learn to deal, you learn to cope. And it sounds like it was fairly recent. So, it's just going to be a lifelong process. It's one of those things. There's no easy fix, and you just have to really check on him and show him the love and support. And hopefully he has seeking counseling. That way he can deal with what he's dealing with in a better way.
Well, talk a little bit about what meaning and kind of sense your family is trying to make out of this tragedy. What approach do you take? Do you take a spiritual approach, an existential approach? How are you making sense of it? Are you spiritual people?
We're not spiritual people. He's went through every element of grief at multiple times. Like I've watched him just tank all the way to where we thought he wasn't going to make it through the day, to the point where he seems like he's on top of the world. And those are the times I think I'm the most worried about him, is when he's over exaggerating that he's okay. But wrapping our minds around the fact that, first of all, he wanted his daughter. He wanted her with him. He was a little street punk. Like, I'm not going to lie, my nephew was a little punk. When he started around 13 to like 17-ish, he was just getting into all kinds of trouble. He was gangbanging. He was a hot mess. And it wasn't, he met Jolene and they were a hot mess together. But then when she got pregnant, he changed. Everything about him changed. He started growing up. He knew he was going to be a dad. He knew he wanted better for whatever children he had down the road than what he was ever out in life. And he worked hard for it. He had a job. He had gotten them into an apartment. He was buying all the baby stuff. Like, he wanted his daughter. And when she was there, he was all about her. Like, he had her with him all the time. Like, he wanted his daughter. And when she left and took her, she was being vengeful. And it's hard to wrap your mind around. Like, you could have just given her to him. You could have just said, here, take her. Like, I know. And she knew that the situation wasn't okay. She knew that there were bruises on Gigi. She was showing signs. And then the night, how do you lay there all night long, hearing your daughter breathing? They talked about in court, like, how the baby's noises would have been. The medical examiner, the pediatric medical examiner, said it would have been obvious that she needed immediate medical attention, even as early as when she got home from work the night before at like 8 o'clock at night. So it's just hard to wrap your mind around. She even went to buy weed in the middle of the night at a 7-Eleven from somebody. They're on video purchasing marijuana in the middle of the night. She was checking her bank account over and over and over again. And then on his phone, they were Googling the signs of shaken baby syndrome.
Right.
And there was even it's just hard to wrap your mind around the whole situation. Like, you could have helped her, maybe even saved her. The medical examiner said if they would have taken Gianna in, we would have had a chance.
Well, so the problem I'm having with this story, and you have to forgive me because this is a case that, was not unfortunately a front page case. So the audience is not familiar with it, but I'm delighted that you're getting an opportunity to put it on blast here to draw attention to it. I think it's extremely important. But as a consequence, I'm not familiar with all the nuances. And, there's nothing more important than those little details in these stories. But what's troubling me about it is that there's two entirely different theories that would meet the facts. One possibility is that these were sort of immature people who, didn't really have coping skills and became overwhelmed and would thrash out toward the child or shake the baby or so forth in that way that you see in people who are sometimes using drugs or are sometimes, a little bit childish themselves or have anger issues or whatever, where you're dealing with a much more emotional problem. But what you can also see, and you saw this, for example, in the case of Mary Beth Tinnig, the sort of angel of death serial killer, who had multiple children that died of shaken baby syndrome until the police caught on that she was doing it on purpose. That's a different thing. That is a situation where, I always talk about this construct I put out there called elimination murder. I labeled it. That is to say, it's certainly been talked about for a long time. But what I call elimination murder is essentially a situation where you're either not ready to be a parent, or you're not looking to be in a romance, or somebody is an impediment to money or freedom or whatever. And so there's no hard feelings, but this person has to go, right? That's Claire. Right. And right. And so the thing is, you get this, there are some cases where there's an intentional shaking of the baby. And in those cases, the people have exactly Munchausen by proxy or something like that. But what you get is people that are researching how to make it look like a baby has died naturally of shaking. And that's usually what you see in an elimination situation. So it's a little complicated because I don't know the details to know whether the accusation was that this was intentional or this was a result of kind of impulsivity, immaturity, and then it led to like this kind of reckless.
What were they charged? What was the boyfriend charged with?
Right. Was it intentional, staged to look like an accident, or what? Or was it a true accident by irresponsibility?
They were both charged with child abuse resulting in death, and hers was child abuse resulting in death, pattern of abuse, failing to seek medical attention. And so there was on his end, there was Google searches during the entire time that they were together. There was Google searches on different things that would harm a baby. One of them specifically was, what happens if a baby takes LSD?
Oh God. So
there were several other ones too that indicated that there was serious issues ahead of time besides the markings on her.
So you're saying that this is more consistent in your opinion, because I can't say. In your opinion, it's more consistent with people who perhaps were not ready to have a child and did not wish to have one. That this is a kind of elimination murder of the type.
Exactly.
Well, that is just absolutely.
Yeah, because there was also an account. I don't want to say exactly, but there was other searches concerning water. I don't like. It's such a blur. I'm gonna have to pull. Literally, I want to pull all the court records, but I don't know what gets me besides me obsessing on them. But there was Google searches about the water. There was Google searches about overdoses of medication. And I don't remember how long do you have to hold a baby underwater. I believe was one of them. So there was a lot of indications there on his part that he didn't want this child. Also came out indications he didn't even want the girl because he was talking to and seeing someone else.
What was this?
So that's another part that's hard to wrap my mind around. Why kill her baby? Why not just not deal with her?
What was the sentence? What was the sentence?
He got 40 years.
40, just flat out 40 with the possibility of parole?
40, flat out 40 years. No, flat out 40 years. And it was I believe he'll have to do 80% of the sentence because of the nature of the charge. But yeah, he got a flat 40 years. Yeah.
And she got nothing.
She's walking the streets right now. Probably making another baby. I don't have the part that horrifies me. Like, she's just living her life. She's cool. Like, her concern was taking care of her boyfriend the whole time the trials were going on. She was giving him heads up.
Right.
Well, there are some people that become afraid, and I can't say that that's what happened here. I'm only speaking generally. There are some people who become afraid that their partner is going to leave them if they have a child because the partner is not interested in being a parent. We certainly saw that in the Susan Smith case, where Susan Smith felt that there was an impediment to a relationship because she had 2 children, so she strapped them into the back of a car and drove it into a lake Or another example is China Arnold, who, thought that her boyfriend was going to leave her, so she microwaved their baby and claimed, as in the multiple microwave infant murders I'm aware of, it's always the same story. I put the baby in the microwave during a seizure. That's the typical defense. I had a seizure. I didn't know what I was doing. I put the baby in the microwave. And, but of course, the minute the microwave was invented, somebody thought, let me use it to kill an infant. That's how technology works. It takes like 10 seconds after something is invented for someone to use it to kill or to engage in sexual activity, those two things. But, it's interesting because, for somebody like me, I do come at things from a spiritual perspective. And for me, I at least, it's unfortunate that there's no earthly way to take any consolation in this story. For me, there's only a spiritual way of interpreting it that would give me any solace. And I cannot imagine what your family is going through, because, that really is, if you're coming at it in a non-spiritual way, it truly is just a complete snuffing out unnecessarily of a budding life. And I suppose the only consolation you could have is that the child was probably so young that there was no real awareness of suffering because it was such a small baby, as opposed to if this was done to an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or something like that, where there was some kind of killing of a child of that age. But such a horrendous story. From a spiritual perspective, for those in the audience that have experienced the loss of an infant, I remember a very beautiful story that was told by, I think it was Saint Catherine of Siena, the great Italian mystic. And the story she told was that she had a very vivid apparition of Christ. And he was holding a ball or an orb. I don't know how you would translate it. I think orb is the more accurate word, where light was shooting out of it. It was the most beautiful, pure orb that she had ever seen. And she said, "What is that?" And she said that the answer was, it's a soul that has still maintained the innocence of childhood. And St. Catherine of Siena responded, "I'm glad you told me, Lord, or else I would have thought there was another God." Well, I always love that story because what it really means is that these infants that are taken out of the world, and you have to understand that from an earthly perspective, it's as hideous as it gets. From a spiritual perspective, that is a soul that will go to its maker without ever having offended its maker ever, even once. And that is a very enviable and beautiful thing, to be that pure before the maker. And I have to say that, that is one of the more horrendous stories I've heard in a long time. It is absolutely hideous, especially when you talked about the research. I really think that what you're describing sounds like an elimination situation, and you might want to think about the dynamics, that could have been at play there. But that is a terrible injustice. Now, regarding your interest in forensic work, I think that's fantastic, and I think that's where you're going to have to kind of channel all of this injustice and go out and prevent horrible things happening to other people. And I think, that your passion about this really needs to be pushed into going out and saving people. I always think, that there's a quality to the work we do. People think we're just sitting around, creating, pictures for law enforcement of what an offender might look like, having a chat with a person who's having fantasies of doing terrible things, whatever. You're actually preventing those people from going out and killing and sexually assaulting and things like that. And in doing that, you really are saving lives. And I think that is the work you have to do. Now, if you're not inclined to go towards a PhD or PsyD, you can get a mental health counselor's degree, you can get a master's degree, so forth, and then get a license to allow you to do either research work, you wouldn't need a license, research work, or clinical work with a license that would allow you to work with individuals in forensic populations. And, you can interview them, you can, write about them, you can research them. It doesn't matter what part of the forensic garden you're in. We're all kind of playing a role, right? one person uses the rake and the other one rips the roots up and the other one does the vegetables. You know, we all have a role. And but I think you should have some role in that garden of forensic activity. But it doesn't matter if you save one life or 100. You know, as the Talmud says, he who saves one saves the world entire.
Well, we appreciate your phone call, and I mean, our condolences to your family.
Yes, and a very beautiful, you know, family. It sounds like right. It sounds like your family putting together this you know, attempt to get justice. You trying to channel this into doing forensic work. I mean, what it sounds like is that, you know, there are members of your family that are wonderful people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Thank you guys so much. I so didn't mean to take over the show.
No, and do me a favor.
Over the show, Lab Rats. I'm so sorry.
If you really
following up for a while, and I've been dying to talk to you guys about this. Thank you guys so much.
if you'd like to write,
if
feel free to write to me if you want to discuss forensic programs and things like that.
Okay.
I'd be happy to help you.
Yay. Okay. Thank you. And Josh, if you wanted to do a documentary on Gianna, we would love to have her story out. Besides in Denver, we got a lot of attention in Denver.
Send me an email too with some links of some news articles about it. I'd love to take a look at it.
And then my nephew would absolutely talk to you as well too. So, but yeah, I will look for the peacocks for Howard.
All right.
All right, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. I love you, and I love you, Lab Rats.
All right. Thank you so much.
What an update. Okay, who's next?
Let's see here. We got 781. 781, you're on the air.
Hi, Josh. It's your favorite Bostonian. How are you?
Hey, Karen. How are you?
Always ready to call in if you happen to catch a call-in.
Perfect.
So it's nice to speak with you. And
Are you recognizing the Massachusetts landmark on my hoodie?
Yeah.
You know what? Because I'm on the speakerphone, you're so tight right now. I'm going to wait to see the full. Does that make sense? So you got on a small screen on the phone with the speaker.
Okay. Well, Josh, you'll have to translate. It sounds like really kind of muffled and
yeah. You're cutting in and out a bit.
Okay, if it gets bad, just tell me you have to hang up on me. It's fine.
No problem.
I am now obsessed with that story of the orb that I got distracted because it was
a beautiful story. Isn't that a beautiful story?
Yes, and especially for that situation. My question is much milder. So there's this term I've been hearing and reading about called childhood emotional neglect. One, is it a newer term? Two, it's not a diagnostic term because it's
right.
not DSM-5.
Yeah, is there more to the? Is there more?
I think. Are you there?
I'm sorry. So, one, what is your definition of childhood emotional neglect? Is it a newer term? And two, and three, is it not really a diagnosis because it's not literally in the DSM-5 yet?
Right. Okay.
All right. So we're going to answer that question on the other side, Karen, and just hold tight though.
Right. You want me to answer that, Josh?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Well, so some people may know about it without knowing what it is. I mean,
No,
but,
I mean, I understand.
Not to my knowledge, an official diagnosis. It's a kind of syndrome that's been defined in the literature. And, what it essentially means, I mean, I have to look if it's something that's being considered an official, like if it has an ICD code and everything. But what it essentially means is that when a child is growing up, his or her caretakers are very invalidating of or cruel toward the emotions that the individual is feeling, so that the person develops a sense of his or her feelings having essentially no meaning. And, we have all encountered someone who has parents that are like that. It is very, very hard. You can stand on your head to try to make a person who has had that experience feel loved or attended to, but they will have a tendency to relate to other people as if other people are fundamentally detached from and indifferent to their feelings, because that is what has become paired with the feeling of love, or at least what is supposed to be love. As a matter of fact, and I've talked about this in a couple of places, but I don't think I ever have on the lab. It's very interesting because when you're a little kid, you kind of have to latch on to your parents evolutionarily. I mean, they have to take care of you or you're screwed. I mean, you wouldn't be able to live. And so the body produces these little dopamine surges that make you feel positively about interacting with the parent figures, even if the parent figures are horrible. The problem with that is that when you grow up, you then get those dopamine surges when you are around people who are treating you badly, because they feel like home. They feel like parents. And you actually cannot get that excitement or that positive feeling from someone who is treating you differently. So the person could be loving you, every night, making you dinner, petting you on the head, kissing you, smooching you, reading to you, listening to you. And if you come from a world in which you were emotionally neglected or even physically abused, and that is what is paired with that bonding with the parents or parent, it's very, very difficult to find such a person attractive. You'll find them unpredictable and kind of scary and even boring is the word I hear. It's a very interesting thing. In the course of psychotherapy, one of the most common conundra that people come in with in terms of romance and relationships generally is they'll say, I have this problem. I'm attracted to two people. One of them is this really, really nice person, and they are always nice to me, always kind, always listening to me, always whatever. But like they're so predictable and so boring, Yeah. And the other person is like kind of a jerk. He's like nasty to me, kind of uses me, whatever. But like the thing is, there's something very exciting about it. Like when he's a jerk or she's a jerk, it just kind of turns me on. And I'll say, well, what do you think the essence of this dilemma is? Well, the first one is just too predictable and boring, and the second one is really exciting and unpredictable. What I'll always say to them is that they actually have it completely upside down. The reality is that the person who treats you like crap and is a jerk and is wild is actually perfectly predictable. You always know where you stand with them because they will never love you.
Mm-hmm.
You have total predictability. With the person who cares about you, you get the crap scared out of you because they're unpredictable in the sense that at any moment they could stop loving you. And it terrifies you. It scares you like to no end.
It's a huge fear. Yes.
It's a huge fear. So what winds up happening is that some people choose predictability over happiness, even if that predictability comes in the form of abuse. Some of them will say, well, I know where I stand with this person that always treats me like crap. There's a kind of strange predictability. Now, they may not be predictable in terms of what they're going to do with their hands or you do with their mouth, say with their mouth, but predictable in the sense of never threatening to love you. And it's very important to soak in this little insight, right? Because it leads to a lot of people ultimately concluding that the absolute safest thing to do, the most predictable thing to do, is to basically just be alone. I mean, that's ultimately the conclusion that such a person will draw, right? So, it's very, very sad, but it often has its roots in that kind of neglectful, awful childhood parental dynamic.
Right.
So I think it's a really good, question that's being raised. If anyone has information to contradict my sense that this is not at this time an official medical diagnosis, please let me know. But I have never heard that it is. But it is something very worth looking into. And I think the caller is not even asking about childhood abuse, physical abuse or sexual abuse. They're just talking about neglect, emotional neglect. And have you ever had your feelings totally ignored by someone?
Yeah, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but I'm sure that I have. But I've seen it happen to friends. I've seen, friends that have been in relationships where they were just treated absolutely awful by their partner, and that they would make kind of excuses for, and you try not to get involved with that kind of stuff, obviously, because you don't want to alienate yourself from your friend. However, sometimes you just go, I'm worried, about you or something like that. And either they become defensive or they go, yeah, I don't know what to do about it. And, you're 100% right when you say that sometimes people don't let people don't let people in if they've been hurt and damaged,
Sure.
especially at a young age. It's hard to kind of penetrate that wall of protection. But yeah, and as for the diagnosis, or if it's it kind of reminds me of like Stockholm syndrome, which is not really a clinical.
Different, right? Oh, you mean in the sense that it's a kind of syndrome that's been described?
People talk about it all the time. They think it's an actual like medical diagnosis, and it's not.
Well, I mean, there are some people that would say that it's even debunked as a construct, but
Yeah.
I've heard people say that, but it's a syndrome that's been described in the literature. Let's put it that way. And but I think it's a very good question.
Yeah, Karen, are you still there?
I've experienced it. A lot of people have experienced it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Gary, that was the best definition I've heard. Just to reassure you, I was, like everything can be on the spectrum. I was on the low end.
Good.
Because it wasn't outright neglect. It was grandparents and mother not really, and me being the sensitive one, not knowing how to deal with those emotions of mine because it wasn't in the repertoire. So I feel fortunate that every single, my two grandparents and my mother were unbelievably lovely, wonderful people. And I'm a person that I'm proud of because of them. But that's something that's been coming up literally at this point in my life, late life. And I just want to give our sort of overview on it. And that you nailed it.
Well,
the simplest form, like without the. Does that make sense?
Well, I have to say that to have someone that is describing the experience of having her feelings invalidated from youth say, thank you for properly understanding what I'm trying to say, actually means a lot. It means a very great deal, right? Because it means that it gives you a positive feeling that there are people that do listen to and take seriously what you're feeling. And that's the whole thing is that, you have to look for those people in the world that really do care about you. There are some people, they act like they don't, but in the final analysis, who else is there talking to you?
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. And but I told the there are you're right. There are people who make you very aware that you're kind of just convenient. You're just a convenience, and you have. And this could be family, this could be boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister. People treat people badly a lot. And sometimes it's just like, if somebody needs something, or if they're, for lack of a better term, just kind of, I don't know, hanging around, just because, or, somebody's with somebody and they're like, well, I'm waiting for a better partner option or whatever. Things like that, or can be so detrimental to people. And but yeah, once you're emotionally abused or neglected at a young age, it has catastrophic consequences for the future if those things aren't addressed and if they're not dealt with, and for the most part, most people don't deal with it correctly because there's no good, unless you go to like in a lot of this, by the way, and like you said on the last show, Dr. Gary, that everybody should be in counseling. I got a message from a listener that said that because they were listening to our show and we talked about counseling and things like that, how they ended up back in counseling because of listening to our show, and they were very grateful that that's something that we promote, because I do think that a lot of people do benefit from counseling and therapy.
Absolutely.
It's one of the best tools that there is. Let's see here. 765. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, you guys.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, my name's Melissa. I called in 2 or 3 weeks ago about my son being concerned because his father murdered 3 people.
Yes.
And I wanted to follow up. I just have the desire to let people know that the month of October, is recognized as domestic violence.
That is right.
Correct. Just a little about that. Are you there?
Yes, I'm so happy that you pointed it out.
Yeah. And this means a lot. And a lot of calls go to that. And I just think more people need to be aware. And I talked about my son, but I want to talk just a little bit about my story. And I'm hoping it'll reach someone out there and help them. And Josh, I don't know if you can put a link below about the national hotline for domestic violence.
Sure.
I would really like that. And
Sure
then
can.
I can have a question for Gary about this. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I started out with my domestic violence. I had a 7-year-old from a previous marriage, and then my 2-year-old that it was his father that committed these murders. And one day he got upset with me and took the youngest one and said, "You'll never see him again." Well, I grabbed him and my older son, and we went and got in the car, started it up, and here he comes flying out. He jumped on the front of the vehicle. And I'm going down the street driving, and he's going around our vehicle trying to get in the window to get our son.
Oh.
And after a couple, 2 or 3 blocks, he realized I was going to the police station, and he grabbed a couple of things and jumped out. And I mean, that was petrifying for my boys. And my point is I go and speak to domestic abuse, safe houses to women, and I always end up about the children. And sadly, after this happened, my older son, he saw the whole thing happen. He would sleep by my bed on the floor with a baseball bat, put chairs underneath the doorknobs because he lived in fear. And I want people to realize how much the children suffer from what we put up with, and that we can put a stop to it. And of course, we separated and left, but that fear lives on. And we can do to help our children means a lot to me. We need to think ahead about that. Of course, we're very important, but my number one priority was my children. And so I'm hoping out of this, someone can notice that you're not affecting you and the fear in you. You're affecting the fear in your children. And this should come above you. And just one little story too, just an example. I also had a friend she was starting to reach out to our safe house, and she was moving out, thinking this is it. She's on camera getting boxes, goes home, and within 20 minutes, her partner goes in there, pours gasoline all over the house, catches it on fire, and she burns up. And so I definitely, from what I've learned, and you can correct me if it's wrong, that a death of woman that's trying to escape, 75% of them is because they're leaving. And how important it is to seek help on how to do that. And I wanted to thank Josh, you and Gary, your support and everything. And I will say I never push anything, and Conard, a week after we had spoke, just out of the blue, brought up, Mom, I don't like living in fear. And we had a very good discussion from that, and I thank you guys for that. But I thought, Josh, if you have anything to say, because we've been in kind of a same situation. Your situation was just a little bit, but you did some counseling. I know you get help, and if we can help someone else. And then, Gary, my question to you is maybe how you can explain to women that we have in our heads, well, they'll change, and how we change our mind on this and get out, and who we can get out to get help.
Yeah.
Just
First of all, I want to thank you for that and your call. It's just an absolutely incredible call, and your strength is it's just unmatched. And so we're going to go ahead and answer your question. And I thank you so much for your call. I'm going to put you. I'm going to mute you here for a bit.
Well, Josh, I want to actually turn the question more to you, because you've been open on this program about having seen these things. But what I would like to do, and there's a reason I'd like to do it, is I'd like to, if it's okay with you, Josh, I'd like to watch the clock and take 30 seconds for the audience, just 30 seconds out of our lives, to contemplate people that are experiencing domestic violence, the reality of the horror of it, experiences you may have had. I just want to pause a moment, because you're talking about a month that has to capture millions upon millions upon millions of little horrible stories, many of which are never told. And I'd like to take just 30 seconds to kind of honor the people that have been hurt by and maybe even died as a result of domestic violence. And I know that many people in the audience, when I do that, are going to be thinking about a specific person that they miss or whose pain sickens them. So let's just do that. Starting. Now, in that 30 seconds, according to statistics, 10 people in the United States, while we did that exercise, experienced domestic violence. Every minute, 20 people. Think about that.
Staggering.
And it's staggering. And if you take one story, it'll break your heart. And it is millions of stories. If you ask any cop, I've asked Chris McDonough on a show once about this. Ask a cop about the scariest calls they've ever experienced. They're domestic violence calls. Those are the ones where you're going to get clocked, something's thrown at you, somebody takes a kid hostage, the guns are pulled out randomly, things are heated. And, the question that was asked at the end is actually very complicated, because the notion that the person simply says, you know what, I've got a new blazing insight about who this person is I'm involved with, and I'm going to get out of here, is actually not that easy. And part of the reason is that the offender in the domestic violence situation has often purposely created a total dependency of the person on them. Sometimes, for example, they completely control the money, which is a kind of abuse a lot of people don't realize. Or another example is that the person may be afraid that there's only so far that they could run. And the person will never, ever, ever stop coming after you. That they're going to find you, that they're ultimately going to kill you, that they're going to, hurt the children, right? And sometimes the person stays because they think the kids are going to get hurt and they'd rather get hurt than have the kids be hurt. In other words, it's never that easy, because once that happens, the person also often discovers that the judicial system sort of stinks. I mean, the person is harassing you, and if they haven't actually threatened to kill you, that you really can't press charges, or you get a restraining order, and the person actually gets more angry because now you're trying to prevent them from being near you, and they don't care about going to jail, or they don't care about killing you. And Josh, I know you could certainly speak to that kind of thing. I mean, what would have been the use of a restraining order in that situation? I mean,
there was no use. Matter of fact,
right.
Right.
But I'm not saying it's hopeless. Let me be clear. I don't want to
it's not. And matter of fact,
but it's hard.
So much has changed from 1987 to today.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, there are resources we can share,
and they take domestic violence so much more serious. Not that they didn't, but they were kind of handcuffed by the law. There's this thing where they always say, well, no crime's been committed, so leave your porch light on type stuff. And, this is years and years ago. And as for being, terrified and scared, it goes so much further than just the actual incident. It's just like the ripple effect. You take a pebble, you throw it in a mill pond, and it just, the center of it is horrific. But as that expands, there are just kind of offshoots of things that come along with it: anxiety, depression, fear, that are instilled in you as a little kid. If you are a child that has experienced trauma, and there's a lot of people that even watching this show and that will watch this show that have experienced trauma as a child, and many trauma comes in many different forms. As for the sleeping next to mother or what have you, things like that, and it was different for me because obviously my mother was gone, my father was gone. But when you hear that your father has done that, in my circumstance where my father did murder my mother when I was a child, and as you start to kind of realize that more and more as you get older, my fear that kind of manifested was that, whether it be unrealistic, realistic, I didn't know at the time. And hell, I still have no idea, what was going on in his head. But I do know that I was so terrified that every night we would go around, and I've told this on the show before, we would go around from we would go around from door to door, window to window every night before bed, and make sure that everything was locked. I demanded that it be done, and my grandparents obliged every night for years. I wanted to make sure everything was locked up. Nobody's getting in. That was very important to me because I was scared. And I, not to air my sister's business out, but she's been very outspoken about this as well. She formed a wetting the bed issue because she was too scared to get up in the middle of the night when she was little. She didn't want to go down the dark hallway. She didn't want to have to walk to the bathroom on her own. And like I said, the ripple effects last forever. But I'm not, you know, as for now, what really started to upset me as I got older was that when my father would come up for parole and my children were young, I would have to explain to them that, you know, their grandfather could possibly get out of prison, and they had never met him or talked to him or anything. And that was the way that we wanted it. However, they became scared when he would come up for parole. And that infuriated me, because there was no way that they should have had to be scared of that. You know, just the same way that I shouldn't have had to been scared. And it was when it started to bleed over into my children's lives, I became very, very upset and angry about it, because I was the one, like, you can deal with it, you know, when it's you, I guess, you know, you're growing up. It's like, this is just kind of life. When your children are involved, I mean, it just used to drive me absolutely crazy. It would just make me so upset, you know. So
You wanted to be a catcher in the rye.
yeah, exactly.
Before they went over the
I didn't want them to have to deal with the bull that I had to deal with. I just did not want that a part of their life. And for the most part, it wasn't. But when that stuff happened, you know, I mean, you like, is he going to come? Does he come in here? Is he going to get to do this? Is he, you know, and I'm just like, first of all, I didn't have the answers. And all I could say was, you know, it's going to be okay. You know, I'll take care of you. It's fine. And you know, it passed without incident most of the time. And it was just, it's a pain in the ass. Like it is a never ending cycle of horse crap. Like we were going through pictures the other day, just old photos, you know, and I found a bunch of, I say a bunch, I mean, you know, of
like
my mother.
Pre-digital, like actually printed photos.
Yeah.
I love those.
Yeah. I found a bunch of them. And I found one that was about a month before my mother's murder. I was being baptized. I was being baptized Catholic, and my sister as well. And I was looking at the photo. My mother's holding me, and I'll share it sometime, but my mother's holding me, and my sister's just kind of standing there. You know, our godparents are there. My father and mother are in the photo. And my father has just this big grin on his face, you know, just because that's just how he was, a turd. And you could see in my mother's face, though, that everything wasn't okay. You could see that she was the only one that wasn't really happy. You know what I mean? Like in that photo, I could see it. And a month later, she was murdered. But up in, you know, there were so many things that we did that she did to try to protect herself, by going to the police, by filing reports, by saying, you know, and you're right. I mean, he used us as like kind of bargaining chips. Like my sister and he used us as bargaining chips to kind of get back into her good graces, and I'll take you to court and you'll never see your kids again. All that kind of crap. Just that nasty, filthy, you know, just emotional hostage type stuff, you know. But yeah, look, it's detrimental. It's detrimental. I'm just fortunate enough to have had a system in place, a family that was so fantastic that we were able to overcome a lot of that stuff. Not all of it. And a lot of it lingers today, Dr. Gary. I'll tell you that. It's just.
Did you see your mother killed?
Yeah, well, I was there. I was in another room, but yeah, yes.
Does your mother ever come to you? Dream?
You know, I wouldn't say. I do have some vivid dreams.
Times when you feel that she's near.
Yes. Oh, no, quite. Yes, definitely.
An object not where you put it that somehow got to another part of the house. You know, things that make
I don't
you.
think I ever had that happen, but I definitely have.
From people, and yeah.
I have felt her presence many times. Specifically just at my son's wedding. I felt that she was there. I really did. It was,
So I have no doubt she was.
yeah, I don't either. I really, but yeah, that the
But,
whole
yeah.
the whole thing was just, yeah, it was a nightmare. But I'll tell you that it did kind of shaped me for,
Mhm.
I don't know, just unfortunately it hindered me in a lot of ways.
Right.
But at the same time, I was taken care of by two really, really good people, that, and God bless them. I mean, they gave up, my grandparents gave up. They were in a motorcycle club. They were buying RVs to go travel, and they gave up everything. Everything. And
Yeah.
but thank God for people like them that are loving and caring.
Well, I mean, that's where God is. When you hear these horrible stories, He's always in the helpers, as they
Yeah.
say. But many people, many patients, because before I became a doctor, I had gone to seminary, and I spent a lot of time talking to people who were spiritually suffering, and then certainly mental health related situations. And I have to tell you that when people are going through mourning, a very common thing that they talk about, it's so common that I almost feel like one day I'll write a book about the process of death, which I know intimately also. Um, they usually do have a dream like that. And I don't know if it's because the brain is kind of ready to let the person go, or if it actually is a spiritual thing coming from outside of the person. But usually the dream is something like that the person who the individual has been mourning comes to them and is in some kind of setting like that represents the kind of spiritual place that they now are. Like they'll say, I saw my dad and he was in this field where all the trees had golden fruit on them. Or I heard that from someone, or another person said, these are people, not patients, but people have said, another person said to me, I saw my father had committed suicide horribly, through a terrible mechanism of suicide. And she said he was very healthy looking and smiling, and he was sitting on a couch, and the couch was studded with diamonds. These are the ways that I think the brain understands the construct of heaven, or like the peace that comes after death in spiritual terms. And because the mind can't fathom it, right? Eye has not seen and ear has not heard, right? So we can only talk about them symbolically. And person will say, and they said to me, I'm happy, I'm okay, you can be okay because I am. And I had a dream like that when my father passed away, and it did give me enormous peace. But I think that I have told many people, including patients, to almost expect it, that when there's a terrible passing, to wait for that. And it does tend to happen.
Mm.
I don't know if it's psychological or spiritual, but it tends to happen. And those stories are very, very powerful. That moment at which you get the sense that the person has not died as much as changed, that they've kind of gone to some other place, and that they have a way of sort of being superimposed over here. I'll give you an example. I'm very interested in people who are very interested in the phenomenon of ghosts. Now, I'm not saying one way or another what I believe about them. I'll simply say that I'm fascinated by the subject. I know more about that subject than most people would believe. And one of the things I find very interesting is the commonalities in the stories that people tell when they have these experiences. And I've had quite a number of people privately tell me extraordinary stories, terrifying sometimes stories of these encounters that they've had that freak them out, or that they wouldn't dare tell anyone. And one of the things I've always found very fascinating is when people describe seeing a apparition, which would really be the proper term for a spiritual thing that is kind of fully formed, right? It has arms and legs and a head, and it's an apparition is the proper term for that. And what the person will say is it was doing something that didn't make sense, like it was walking across the living room as if there were a floor there, or it was just walking right through the wall, right? And then what's fascinating is that it turns out that in some period in history, there was a balcony that went across the living room, or there was not a wall there. And so the person comes to understand that what they're seeing is kind of almost like the flickers of an event that is happening over and over and over and over again in a setting the way it once was, superimposed over this, as if the door is not there and the balcony is still present. And so this thing can just keep walking across the balcony. And the other thing that's very fascinating about these kind of things is that these people that see them are usually people, they say, to whom the entity reaches out through a kind of shared grief or a shared experience. Sometimes it'll be a child that has a luminous energy that the story is that the spiritual entity envies because it has lost life and clings to it. So the classic trope of the small child that's seeing the, especially young girls. And the other thing that you sometimes um, you'll sometimes see is the individual who has gone through a terrible loss and then suddenly begins to experience this kind of thing. And there's an amazing movie about that kind of haunting experience called The Changeling, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, an authentically terrifying movie with George C. Scott about that kind of haunting where a man loses his family in a car accident and moves into a home and then begins to experience a haunting. And the most amazing thing about that story is that it is 100% based on a true story that actually occurred. And so, I'm very interested in those kinds of stories. And it's funny because the similarities in them are very striking. And the things that people tell me in private, Josh, you wouldn't believe. I had a person tell me recently that they were traveling. This is a person, not a patient, a person out in the world, told me that they were traveling in Tokyo and they went into their bathroom in the hotel and put on a robe and, after the shower and had towel in their hair and they were drying their hair. And when they looked up, on the bed in the hotel was a construction worker with his hands over his face. And she went like that very quickly to put the towel over her eyes. And when she took the towel away, there was nobody there. And another person told me a couple of years ago, they thought they were losing their mind. A person in my neighborhood came to talk to me. They thought they were losing their mind because they had an experience where they absolutely swore, that they kept seeing a small child in a blue hoodie with sneakers on that would run up and down the stairs of the house whenever they would come into the house, into the vestibule, and they could just barely catch the kid. So these things are very disturbing, but I don't think they could be dismissed because they happen with enormous frequency. I tell these things in time for Halloween, I guess, but they happen with enormous frequency, and I cannot dismiss them.
It's like Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Well, I mean, I can't dismiss them because they happen a lot more than you think, and they tend to happen to people who are very sane and who simply are embarrassed to tell anyone. And so they tell you in private, they say, look, I had an experience that was really bizarre. I've also had a lot of people who've had experiences of a loved one, somehow doing something that was like a sign to them. I even had a story one time, true story, of a person who had a very vivid dream of their deceased relative pointing at a very weird random place in a wall in the living room. And they became so obsessed with this dream that they broke the wall down, and in it was a will. Now, how do you explain that? I can't. Chris always tells fascinating stories about supernatural experiences he's heard associated with police work.
So does Dr. Catherine Ramsland.
Oh yes, she certainly does, and I don't think it's weird to talk about it because I'm totally agnostic about it. I just think it's an interesting phenomenon, and it makes me think that perhaps we have to remember, like for example, those in the audience that are Christian. I mean, for goodness sake, the whole essence of the faith is that a person who died in spiritual form was resurrected, could walk through walls, could ascend to heaven, could change his physical appearance, could be in multiple places at the same time. Sound familiar?
Sure.
So the whole essence of Christianity is a kind of ghost story, right? So I just think that's fascinating, and I refuse to dismiss it. And I mention it because, as I know there are going to be people in the audience that are very, very cynical and very, very scientific, and I am all for that. I am a rationalist and a scientist. But a rationalist and a scientist would never dismiss anything. They would simply say, give me more proof. I'm open to that. Give me more proof. I'm interested. And that's what I'm saying. And I mention it because it gives a great, great deal of consolation to a lot of people to have that feeling that the people that they love don't really die.
Well, what do you think about this question on the screen right here? Then that kind of ties right into sort of what we're talking about here. This is the afterlife. And Gracie girl, thank you so much for your donation. Do you think we feel emotions after death?
Well, I think the operative word is feel. I mean, feeling is in the body, and I think the point is that for people that are over there, it's probably more of a spiritual place. I would imagine that feeling is an earthly thing and associated with a lot of the problems and flaws that people have. So my sense would be that there is love, but love as a kind of verb, not as a feeling. Love as a kind of a selfless regard, not warm and tingly love, and because remember, the Christian mystical construct is that love on earth between a couple, for example, or in a family, or the love that people have for each other in a group or friends or in a church or in a synagogue or a temple or a mosque or whatever, is simply a kind of preparation for the love that all people will have for each other there. We can only handle it with a couple of people here, but there is no marriage, there is no giving birth, that's why I always thought it was very funny in old paintings that angels have belly buttons. They're not born, so why do they have belly buttons? They're eternal. They don't give birth, and they were never born. So why do they paint them with little belly buttons?
I've never noticed that.
It drives me crazy, but it makes no sense. Anyway, all I'm saying is that I wanted to put that out there because
wait a minute,
there are a lot of people that find that enormously consoling.
It drives you nuts?
What drive me nuts?
The belly buttons on the angels.
You know how I am. I think about something like that and I can't get it out of my head. It's a Columbo-esque problem I have. But I mean, it's annoying because it makes no sense.
I'm so glad that I'm in my brain and not yours.
Do you have any idea the things that drive me crazy? I mean, Josh, I saw a sign on a restaurant, on a 7-Eleven, I think it was, and it said, "No dogs allowed inside except seeing eye dogs."
So there's dogs allowed in, yeah.
Here's the sign. Why did they write that on the door? Put it in Braille. It makes no sense. Yeah. There are things like that that absolutely madden me. It's like you just kind of sit there and you go like, no, like I can't. This doesn't compute.
Well, that's funny because I walked into a place the other day where it said no dogs allowed except service dogs, and I was just like, so there are dogs allowed in here then, I guess.
Who sees it?
It's a good point.
And some of those little conundrum can be really funny.
Can like, dogs read?
Yeah. Well, somebody said to me once, if a pregnant woman goes swimming, is she a submarine? That's a very interesting little question. some of them are, it's like a, if you take the wings off of a fly, is it a walk?
I mean, those feel like puns.
No, they're just these things. Like another example is, if you don't put milk in a refrigerator, it's going to get bacteria in it, right?
Yeah.
Why doesn't that happen when it's in the cow? The cow is not refrigerated. Why is there no bacteria developing on the milk?
Why do we know that we can drink from a cow? Who thought of that one?
It's just these things.
You ever think of that?
They'll get to you.
Who's the first person to drink from a cow?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I have to see. We
think their mothers, but then
here's what I imagine. I imagine there's some weirdo across the street before there were streets, and he sees like a cow nursing, like a little calf nursing. He's like, I'm gonna find out what that's about. It's the same thing. Like you're gonna start painting angels without belly buttons.
Well, it's because they would use children to paint the to paint angels. So that's the whole problem. It's funny. Somebody asked me recently that there's a mask behind me on my. See that mask that's there? They say, "Who is that I have on the wall?" And it's actually very interesting, and it's in French. I could say it in French, but I'll say it in English. It translates to the unknown woman of the Seine River. And she was a prostitute, a teenage prostitute who jumped into the river, committed suicide in the 19th century. And her body was put on display in the window of the morgue. That's what they used to do, so that you could identify the person. And her face was so luminously happy that they made a mask of it. And all the local artists started to buy it and use it as the face of the Virgin Mary, the face of angels. There are at least 20, 30 paintings that are out there, very famous ones that that have the face of the unknown woman of the Seine. And the most interesting thing about it is that it became the face of the CPR doll. That's why the CPR doll is called Annie, because it's a play on the French word for unknown. The most kissed face in the world is the face. So I find that story fascinating, and somebody gave me a little copy of it, so I put it up there, and that's the story. But you can see that face in many, many paintings.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
we got a couple more calls. Let's take them.
Yeah. Anyway, going off the deep end tonight.
I mean,
weird people needs to go to sleep. Well, that's true.
860. Go ahead. You're on the air. Where are you from? 860. I have you muted. I'm so sorry about that. That's Gary's fault.
Annie, are you okay? You've been hit by a smooth criminal. Okay, well.
You're on the air.
That's not Annie. Can you hear me?
Are you there? Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
That's all right. I'm from Connecticut. I wanted to ask. This is way off topic with where you guys are going. I don't have any ghosts or any.
We're not going. We weren't going anywhere.
It's interesting when people talk about them. That's all.
I loved it though, but I wanted to ask Gary what his thoughts were, and I don't know if you've been talking about it elsewhere, whether you have read or seen the Stephen Stern's parents interview.
Oh yes, yeah.
Did a couple interviews. The parents.
Chris McDonough did really good coverage of those on his show, The Interview Room.
Yeah, but I'd love to know what your opinion is on that stuff too.
Well, which one?
Psychological standpoint,
the interview with the wife. I mean, with the mother.
Mm-hmm.
Which one are you interested in?
Well, I've seen a couple that they've done with the police. I know the father did a lot of stuff with the police. What I found interesting. I was wondering about that. I mean, the father kind of got right on board with everything. Threw Stearns right under the bus, and people like, that's great. He's given all this information. He couldn't get the evidence to them fast enough. And, you know, okay, so, I mean, Steven Stearns is a monster, and they're going to want to protect themselves. But at the same time, I've seen the two interviewed together. And it's just a little strange. I guess that, I don't know, they're in a hell of a predicament. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like being his parent. But it seems like the father can't get enough information to the police to get away from kind of him. And the mother, on the other hand, I sense there's some anger and protection kind of under that with her, that she's doing the same thing. Just, handing everything over and saying, here's what we have, and, his computers and all this stuff. But at the same time, I just wonder if she's feeling that too, or if she's, I don't know. I just wondered what you thought of it. If she seemed to be saying all that stuff, but I got the sense that she's very protective of him. As she said, I mean, he's a 37-year-old child living at home, and, daddy's paying his phone bill. They give him a gas card. I mean, it was like he was 14. So I guess that would make sense, but I just wondered what your feelings were on it.
Well, I think that,
but I guess you haven't.
I think that the most important point, to really come out of that, speaking to the parents, is that they essentially said that across the entire time that they've known him, he's been a liar. I mean, I think there was even like a direct quote about that, like, he spent a lifetime lying to us. And that's very, very important, because in that little sentence is actually a great deal of information, right? Because it tells us that we're talking about something that's been going on the way, like, you tend to see in a personality disorder or something like that, where it really starts young and it's just pervasive, right? You don't just like become a liar, but rather it went on, for a long time. And that's important. And I think also the idea that they kind of knew it, meaning that he had that typical problem, that empathy problem, where you can't feel that people could tell you're lying, right? So already you get the sense of somebody who was kind of weird with an empathy problem and never told the truth, that got kind of caught up in fantasy and couldn't tell the boundary between reality and fantasy. And I just think that it tells you a very great deal that he's been that way as long as anybody's ever known him. The other thing, of course, that I think is going to emerge as time goes on, because I have to tell you, if it doesn't emerge, I'd be pretty floored, is that a person doesn't just have a single victim of this kind of thing. And I think at the age that this guy is, and given these glimpses of him always being a little bit of a BS artist and having these kind of weird ways of, slipping into fantasy and all that, it sounds like he probably had that kind of fantasy world going on a long time. And, I think generally, if you look at predators, they start, sometime late teens, early 20s. And then, it culminates in something like this. Usually when it goes into killing, it's usually just to get rid of the victim, or because the assault has been so cruel, so intense that the person dies. It's usually not that it's usually not that the person is doing it as part of the pleasure. It's usually to eliminate the victim for some reason. So what I think is, it's probably going to emerge that he was at least flirting with the idea, toying with the idea of taking a victim for a long time for sexual purposes. Remember, for example, there was this idea of him working at Disney World, which, for a lot of predatorial people, certain kinds of jobs becoming a way of touching kids, right? Edward Paisnell, the child abuser, was dressed up as Santa at Christmas time so the kids could sit on his lap, right? And he was a child toucher. Right. John Wayne Gacy dressed up as a clown, I think, as an excuse to touch children. So I think we're going to find out that he was always somebody with a kind of, for a long time, a person with a paraphilic perverse attraction, who probably would get involved with an adult woman simply as a means of getting to the kid, and would then groom and kind of abuse the parent. And what I think is going to be extremely interesting is going to be to see how this kind of wimpy, weird, odd guy was actually a kind of master manipulator, who knew how to pull strings and so forth. I was fascinated. I was on Court TV, and they had me talk about the footage of him in the police vehicle, and I was astounded at the way he would you could tell, just make these stories up just to keep up with the cop, telling stories. And they were just these yarns, these old, kind of chestnuts, like that, like as if he had told them for years. And they would totally fabricate, you could tell. And I just think that, that fantasy world in which he lives, it tells you a very, very great deal about how he would probably like to be alone with his perverse thoughts, with the video footage, and that he would kind of orchestrate this inner world that was personal to him and terrifying. And I really, really think that if we could really understand what that child went through, I mean, we would be heartbroken and probably vomiting.
I don't really like. I probably should have, and I didn't. But like, I didn't really have it in me to talk much about that case, and I didn't cover it much because, I would just think of how terrible of a life, that Maddie had, and it was it's horrific what she went through, and then her ending to her short life that was filled with abuse and manipulation and nobody protecting her. It's almost too much to bear sometimes, when you think about it. And as for Stephen Stearns, he's the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
I mean,
obviously he has to be found guilty, but I mean, I think when you've got somebody on videotape doing things, I mean, that's the part. I mean, I have to tell you, I think a lot about the jurors in that case and what they're going to have to see.
It's going to be bad. Yeah.
And it's going to be rough. My heart really goes out. That is a case I wouldn't want to be on.
The evidence is going to, when the evidence comes out, and it sounds as though they have some substantial evidence, and it'll come out in court. And you're right, he is the accused, not the convicted. But just from everything that's come out, and you hear them talk, I mean, obviously there were terrible things going on in that that house or apartment or whatever it is. I don't even know what the hell were they living in, like a duplex or something? Something
it's actually really nice. It's actually a pretty nice condo in a nice part of Florida. It's like a 3 or 4 bedroom with like 3 bath condo, and Jen's stepfather owns it, and so they rent out the rooms. I imagine Jen doesn't have to pay because they rent out enough of the rooms. That's why there wasn't room for Maddie. That she had a little room that was part of the living room that was kind of boarded off. But it was a.
Did you see how white that whole house was? Did you ever see a house as white as that house?
White.
It looked like a sepulcher.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but
I'm telling you, it was like the only color was like if there was like a slipper on the floor or something. It was very white. It almost had a quality of like suggesting somebody kind of like cognitively limited or kind of, like when you look at a person's home and you could tell from all the different interests that they have that they must have a lot going on over here, because there's just so many objects, so many things from trips, so many pictures, how loved they are, how big. And then you get those people that the inside of their home is just sterile and kind of white. And you can just imagine what that reveals about what's going on in the brain, about that kind of detached, dissociated, empty, limited kind of, sort of like you would imagine like a prison or something, right? Like an unloved feeling.
Hospital.
It's like a detention
Yeah,
center.
hospital, detention center. Exactly. Nothing personal, no humanity to it, nothing. And you also saw that a little bit with the Summer Wells living quarters, except the Summer Wells living quarters were more bleak, like a prison, like an oubliette, I always say. Like one of those holes in a dungeon, they just throw you down. And my favorite part of that story is that the Wells, the parents will say, she was playing. Like with what?
Right down in the basement.
Torture chamber. Like what was she playing with?
Right.
Was she Wednesday Addams? You don't play in a torture chamber.
By yourself. By yourself.
Right.
By yourself. How many little kids like to go into the basement?
Hideous. No, it was disgusting. Right. And then there was like a perverse video on. Remember?
Yeah, I certainly do.
Right when Chris went on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like sometimes you think about the crapshoot, as I always say, the crapshoot by which people come into this world and come to their parents, and then you think about how some people just get parents like this, and it's and now look, in the case of Soto, that wasn't her biological father. I think that in fact what this groomer did, if he's guilty, I think what he did was he took advantage of the fact that her biological father wasn't there and tried to create an emotional bond where he masqueraded as caring about this kid, when in reality the goal was to completely use her. And what I thought was so vomitous was the way that when he would lie, and he was lying, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, when he would lie, he would always go out of his way to put the little signs that you would expect to be there in a loving parent. So he'd say, I watched in the rear view mirror just to make sure she was safe. I was trying to be sensitive to not walk up to the school so she didn't get embarrassed, which tells you that with this kind of person, what you really have is a capacity to mimic a human, to mimic feelings, to have empathy enough to do that, but you have no compassion. You literally just use the ability to read feelings and imitate them for the purpose of destroying someone and using them. And that's really what you understand is like the terrible lie. My guess is, if I had to make an educated guess of what happened to this kid, it's probably that something associated with turning 13 was a problem. Either she went into puberty and was no longer the age of interest to him. She became aware of what was happening to her, to the point that she wanted to say something to someone. Perhaps she got connected with someone at school and told the story, and they said, he can't do that to you. Maybe she got pregnant. We don't know.
I that's what I think.
Something happened to her, and she was
pregnant. I think that his disgusting secrets couldn't get out, and elimination murder, Dr. Gary.
That's what I think it was. I agree.
And
I think that with Wells too.
Can't what do they say? Dead men tell no tales. I mean, that's the point of your elimination murder. It's like the mafia. You don't want somebody to testify. They take them out. And I don't mean to oversimplify it because she's a 13-year-old girl, and Summer Wells is a 5-year-old girl who still hasn't been found, and a case that's just near and dear to my heart, and it's sickening that we're going 3.5 years and nothing. But here we go, with this with Maddie, and like you said, I checked my window. He said that he dropped her off on the other side of an overpass, like a half a mile from the school. I don't know how that's carrying. Also, I don't know how that you can get a little closer to the school without somebody seeing your car and being embarrassed of it. I mean, his whole story was a crock, the whole thing. I mean, we listened to it. We did an episode about it on the Witness Box. We sat there and listened to him talk about going to McDonald's, not going to McDonald's, going to McDonald's, not going, and it was just hard to listen to.
Right. Well,
I'm not a morning person. My head is so confused. He kept saying like, yeah, and I'm not usually up in the morning.
He's probably true because he's a lazy ass.
Right. Well,
Right.
you know, I mean, look, it's at least in the case
Right.
of Soto, they found the body. In the Wells case, I mean, Lord
Right.
only knows where that kid is. I mean, you know, as Stalin, you know, famously said, no body, no problem. You know, I mean, I think that's the reason you haven't seen anybody accused. I mean, they need a body, and you know, I really think that's the issue. And I can't stand that case for that reason. You know,
I agree,
but in the case of Soto, thank God, you know, they found the. I thought it was interesting, that whole thing with the flat tire and pulling over on the side of the road. I thought that was a cover story to explain why he was going into the trunk and like carrying something heavy and whatever. I think the point was to make it look like there was nothing weird about him going into the trunk on the side of the road by the forest area.
Yeah, well, as soon as I heard him say I was going to the store to get magic cards, I was out on him. I was like, get this guy out of here. I don't want to hear this story anymore.
But he just, I mean, the stuff he makes up as he goes along is bizarre. Anyway, I agree.
Thank you so much.
I agree with the caller about the
Yeah, I do too.
horrors of that person, and you know, and I hope.
See, we got back on track. No more. We weren't talking belly buttons or anything.
Nothing wrong with belly buttons.
With belly buttons. No, that was good. I like that.
Never gonna look at one of those cherub paintings the same way.
I'll never look at it. You've ruined me for life, dude.
It's gonna bother you. You're gonna say, "What is this?"
I didn't know that angels were never born. I never knew the angels were never born. I thought people became angels after they died.
No. Angels are different than humans in Christianity. In fact, that's the whole reason there's a story.
Some humans don't become.
No, they just become glorified.
People can't become angels.
No,
people like Stephen Stearns go to hell.
They become glorified. But remember.
No, but what about guardian angels?
No. I mean, if you're asking theologically, the idea is that's precisely why there's the whole idea of some angels rebelling, is because they developed a terrible jealousy of the special relationship that God had with his new creations, which were humans, and as a consequence rebelled. And so the idea is that they are very different than people. People can become glorified in heaven, but they don't become angels. Angels are basically pure spiritual beings that don't know the difference between good and evil, and as a consequence can't sin. They're not really capable of it. They don't know the difference. There's a wonderful Mark Twain book called The Mysterious Stranger that is about a little boy whose name is Satan, who is an angel that visits a medieval town. And because he doesn't know the difference between good and evil, he wreaks an enormous amount of havoc, because the people say, make this happen. And he says, okay, I will. But it like winds up causing some catastrophic event, because he's toying with his powers. His name is Satan. Yes, it's a great book. Mark Twain wrote it after the death of his daughter. He became very disillusioned with his faith, and he wrote this deeply disturbing book, The Mysterious Stranger. The only thing more disturbing than the book is the claymation movie that was made in the 80s of that story, which is a good cure for insomnia. I mean, for happiness, I guess. It's a good cure for happiness. It's terrifying. It really is. So, but
Satan was an angel that was cast out of heaven.
Sorry.
I knew that part. I bet I didn't know he didn't have a belly button.
Well,
no, he wouldn't have a belly button. But he
was a snake too. But
and Adam and Eve wouldn't have had belly buttons if you believe they literally existed. Their kids would, but Adam and Eve were not born, so they wouldn't have belly buttons either. Adam and Eve shouldn't have belly buttons in paintings. They were not born.
Thank you for your call. I gotta get.
I can't tell you how much this.
I'm gonna have to go look a lot of things up.
Oh my God!
I'm gonna have to do a lot of googling.
You have done. This is what we call Dr. Naval Academy. You have attended the Naval Academy. Congratulations.
Oh my Lord! I'm gonna see every.
Wonderful. I've enjoyed it.
Good. Thank you so much for calling. Every time I see an angel painting, I'm gonna check for a belly button, and I'm telling you, I don't like if I take my grandma to the doctor and I got a magnifying glass up against and they're like, everybody's like, what are you doing? I'm going to blame you. I'm going to hold you personally responsible for that.
You absolutely should. But you are now a graduate of the Naval Academy, so you're aware.
I didn't enroll, but thank you.
Right.
Caller, go ahead. You're on the air. This will be our last call for the night. Thank you so much. Go ahead. Naval Academy.
Hi, it's Carrie from Oklahoma.
Hi, have you been to the Naval? You will, if you've been listening, you're also a graduate.
Well, I have something to contribute to this. I had a major surgery, and when I woke up, that I didn't have a belly button.
Really? That fascinates me.
Yeah.
It doesn't fascinate
and
me.
the doctor came to me. My surgeon came to me. He warned me. He said, "Terry, you're not going to have a belly button." And I was like, okay. And he said, "I can get a plastic surgeon to build you one if it bothers you." And I thought, nah, I'll live without it. But I mean, it's strange. Don't kid yourself.
Your belly button.
Right.
Maybe you're an angel.
Anyway.
Thank you, Josh. How do you?
Well, I don't
think. I mean, it's amazing to me.
Okay,
so
here's my question.
It was basically,
yeah, I don't.
completely gone. That's astounding to me. Thank you for that anecdote. But what did you call about? I'm sure you didn't call to talk about that. So,
I mean, I could talk about not having for a long time because there's been moments in my life that, it's been rather startling to people. And I don't mean just men. I mean, my daughter, my mother. My mother came over there and pulled back and she was like, "Whoa, that's going to look weird." I'm like, "Well, Mom, why can't you normalize this? Hello." But anyway, Dr. Gary.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. I know the last call of the night had to be this weird, right? Dr. Gary.
I want you to know that
too protected.
This is my kind of thing. Like, everything has gotten so primitive that it's hilarious to me. I love when people just pull, like, they strip away the mask and they just get bonkers because this is the most ridiculous moment I've ever had, So it's great. Now, just moving right along, leaving the world of the abdominal apertures. Let's go. So, what is it that you're interested in?
I'm gonna. Do you think that children can be too protected? We talk a lot about children that are absolutely not protected, but do you think children can be too protected?
It's an interesting question. Well, I mean, I suppose that. Go ahead.
The reason that I'm asking is I grew up in a very small Oklahoma town. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew everybody. My dad was my principal in every grade that I was in. I don't know, now that I think about it, that was very intentional on his part. But, he had to be making moves as he went through his career to be my principal. Now, I had 2 older brothers, and we were religious, went to church 3 times a week. Everybody knew everybody in this small town. You could not get away with anything. In the home, my parents did not fight in front of us. Now, they would disappear to the bedroom, and I remember being aware of this, and they would come out what I would call mad at each other, like just not talking. And I would think, wow, I wonder why they're not talking. But then the moment would move on. Then I had these 2 older brothers that were 8 and 6 years older than me, and they were teaching me to fight. Like literally physically fight. And they were telling me people will be bad, Terry.
Right.
They're not all this small town good, so you're going to have to fight. My parents didn't know about that. Mm-hmm. And so I had this juxtaposition of small, dad is my principal, nothing ever happened at school. Of course, I think that had a flip effect in that more was expected of me with every one of my teachers. Let me tell you, my dad must have gone, well, he admitted later. He went to my teachers and said, do not let her get away with anything. Make her work harder than everybody else. So, there's a lot going on here. But, I came out of this community and went to college, and I started dating. Well, I dated in high school, but it was still the hometown boy, not really anything. But I started dating these guys, and they would try to fight with me. And I would and my brothers had told me, you don't have to take crap off of anybody, but especially men. Now, I took that to heart. So when these guys would get mad at me or whatever, I'd be like, what's your problem? And then they'd want to fight, and I'd be like, I'm not doing this. This is stupid. Walk away, or whatever. And then, as I get older into my career, I unfortunately had a job where I traveled. It was me and like 30 men, of which 95% were married. Mm-hmm. And I quickly found out that these married men were not really like all that faithful. I would go do my laundry in the hotel laundry room, and one would just show up there talking to me. And I'm thinking, why is he talking to me? Okay, whatever. So I would talk, whatever, and I'm doing my laundry. And then he would say, hey, you want to come back to my room? And I'd be like, what for? Like I really did not know that I was getting propositions, like literally, like.
Right. Yeah. So you feel you were seeing the world through a kind of rose-colored glasses, a kind of Pollyannish view, and then people were able to kind of take advantage.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I always had this deep-seated suspicion of everybody because my brothers they had taught me that people were bad, and especially men, and they would say it like that. And they were like, do not ever get yourself into a situation where you were alone. I mean, even being alone with these guys in the laundry room was not really good enough for me. I was like, just go back to your room, whatever. So I really feel like I had no concept of life in a relationship at all. Like between my parents, not fighting, everything seeming perfect, going to church. The people at church were really my social life, right? So weren't,
right.
Even not all church people good, but I don't know that I even realized that growing up. I just grew up with these people and we did things together and no big drama and nothing bad ever happened. And I know that everybody that's listening to this is like, oh my goodness, rolling their eyes. What kind of problems can you possibly have? But I think it's very interesting in that not preparing people can get them in as much problems because I've had different problems with different people during my life.
Well,
and you can end up in the same place as people that have problems. Does that make sense?
Let me tell you that I experienced a bit of that myself. When my grandmother took us in, she was overly protective and micromanaged every little thing that we did for a very long time. No fault of her own. That's just how it was, because she had just lost a daughter and she was just very cautious with us to the point where it would drive me nuts, to where I would get annoyed by it. And it has a negative, it can have a very negative reaction. It's so stupid to a child.
Like I've reacted to situation as an adult that I look back on it now and I'm like, Terry, guys propositioning me and like to their face, like married guys. And I'd be like, are you just stupid?
I've had that happen too.
Should you say something?
Married guys.
Should you be like that with people? Probably not. But like, I really felt that way. Like your wife, just because your wife isn't here, you think as the only woman on this, trip, I'm going to sleep with you. Like, what's wrong with you? So there has to be a happy medium in all of this because,
right.
I feel like there's in a way I ended the same place as some other people without even having any problems at all as a child.
Right. Well,
did you do something? Did you do something to get yourself in trouble because of it?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No. In fact, I went to my boss. the first time it happened, I've always gone to my managers because technically this is a work trip. Even if we were off work, we were, supposed to act a certain way or whatever. And so I went to my boss the first time and I'm like, hey, listen, so-and-so propositioned me in the laundry room. I'm putting your number on number one speed dial. And I've had to dial his number on several occasions. And he'd answer the phone and I would say, hallway outside room 510, whatever. And he would come there and they would, of course, know that I had called him and they would run. And he would show up and I'd wait for him and I'd be like, well, he ran. He said, I'll talk to him. And most of the time
sorry, but I do want to ask you this really quick. What is it that when you say you ended up in the same place as others, what is that? Do you mean just like emotionally that you felt trapped or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel trapped. I feel actually as an adult, I don't trust men at all. Like I can go on a date and I can go on several dates with the same guy and it will take me a very, very long time to trust them.
Well, I could see that.
I've had more serious situations. One guy, I was graduate. It was my last class for my MBA, and I was caught very off guard. Got off work at 10. This dude that I had dated before in the past, but was not currently dating, was waiting at my apartment, and he was like, "Hey, I know it's your last class." I'm like, "How do you know it's my last class?" Okay, whatever. And he said, "I'll come up and we'll sell it. I'll take you to dinner." Okay. So we go up, and I somehow end up I get ready to go out to dinner after class. And he is like barricaded me in my apartment. And I had to wait for him to go to sleep. And then I had to wake him up. And then I had to say, hey, I need to go out to CVS or whatever. And he was like, okay, because he was half asleep. And so he moved the barricade and I ran and he chased me. And as I'm trying to back my Jeep up out of the parking place, he comes after me with a tire iron. And he smashes it in on the driver's side, hits my arm. I thought he broke my arm. He didn't. And I could only drive with one hand. I had 911 on the call while all this was happening. And so what I'm saying is, now that may not be, that is definitely not as bad as a dead child. Okay. I realize this. Okay. But you still, as an adult, can end up in the same kind of serious, it could have almost been a death of me, right? So, as idyllic as that sounds, as my childhood sounds, and it probably is to a whole lot of people, I still don't know that it prepared me for life in a big way. Does that make sense as an adult?
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand that. They always say that the preacher's kids are supposed to be some of the worst children because they have a tendency to want to rebel. And as somebody who grew up in church, I can confirm that some of that is true. But yeah, I think
my dad was
he was a preacher too.
My dad was also a part-time preacher. And a principal. He would preach when the preacher couldn't be there. So, we're dealing with both of that. But I was never a wild child. I told the lie. I didn't even have a curfew. My parents didn't put a curfew on me because I just came home at what I thought was an acceptable time or would be an acceptable time to them.
Yeah.
But what I'm at, so when my dad,
Go ahead.
I just think it's very interesting that sometimes we can all end up in the same kind of serious situations in spite of a wide variety of how we were raised as children.
Yeah, and everybody look, everybody's situations. I have people tell me all the time. They say, I had my wife passed away of cancer, and I had to raise our two children. And then they would go, it's nothing compared to what you've been through. And I hear that a lot. And I don't compare tragedies because there's no sense in comparing tragedies. What everybody deals with individually, the way that you handle it is upon you, because you don't know anybody else's struggle. I don't know anybody else's struggle. I only know mine. And so I completely understand what you're saying. Dr. Gary, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the original question that was asked is a very interesting one. You know, it reminded me of the way that some people scrub their children down with so much soap, antibacterial soap, and things like that, that the child doesn't develop any healthy immune system. You know, like it's like overkill, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, there's an old saying that a person should be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove. Well, that is the right way to be. In other words, you have to be out in the world aware that there are terrible, terrible things out there. You can't be naive to them, but you have to go into the world and not participate in those things. You're aware of them, but you still are a good, innocent human being. But you can't be a fool, right? The reality is they are there. And, you know, like if you've ever seen Into the Woods, the Sondheim musical Into the Woods, the character of Little Red Riding Hood is very interesting because she's sort of a proxy for a person that is abused sexually by the big bad wolf. It presupposes a kind of a seduction, that the wolf is seductive and then turns out to be a predator. And when she kind of learns her, you know, the lesson that there are predatory males out in the world, she says, take extra care with strangers, even flowers have their dangers, and nice is different than good. In other words, you have to come to the realization that there are a lot of people out in the world that are going to be kind to you because they want something from you, but they're not good.
Yeah.
And you know, and there's a huge difference. You'd be astounded how many people don't know the difference between nice and good, which is an enormous problem. And you know, in fact, very often the things in life that are good for you don't really come in very nice forms. Hence why you rebel against them. But I think that, you know, the point you're making about, you know, naivete and so on, you also want to remember that times are changing. 50 years ago, I mean, people didn't even lock their doors where you grew up. I mean, you didn't even lock the door. It didn't even occur to you that anything could happen. The worst thing that would happen in certain parts of this country was, you know, front page news was a kid got bitten by a dog. You know, the local postman got stung by a bee, you know, and his leg blew up. That was the worst thing that would happen. Now, what you're seeing are things like, you know, commonly, even in small town America, kid brings an AR-15 to school and kills his classmates. You know, a person shows up at a block party with a handgun and kills 3 people because he's emoting, because he's been rejected by someone. Children that commit murder, dismemberment cases, sexual assault with horrific torture, things like that. Times are different. I mean, that's part of the heart of The New Evil, the book I did with Michael Stone. The heart of it is not all times are equal. If these things are just part of being human, they would happen at the same rates in every country and all across time. But they don't. There's a newness to the increase. And so I think a lot of the naivete that people had even 50 years ago is being lost because it's just, you can't be a child in the world right now and be naive. Another example, of course, is the exposure people get to things on the internet. Every kid is walking around with one of these, you know, and everything is there at their fingertips. And innocence is very rapidly lost.
Yeah, it is. That's
and, you know, I mean, that's the whole thing. Your friends say, oh, you know, what do you mean you haven't looked up such and such, you know? And, you know, 11, 12, 13 years old, probably you're already looking at stuff like that. I mean, the idea that there was a time set aside for childhood is something that's being lost. Now, admittedly, prior to the Industrial Revolution, the construct of childhood kind of didn't exist. It was only that's why, like, again, going back to old paintings, that's why babies in old paintings basically just look like little men. The idea of childhood, a time when you had toys and you whatever, That was an idea that came with the Industrial Revolution when kids couldn't work, But before that, kids worked on the farm when they were like 3 years old. There was no childhood. The idea of childhood was like fantasy land. There was just being an infant, and then you were basically a little man.
That's right. Like when you asked me, like, who, like, what mythical, TV character, and I said Peter Pan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
What story are you living out with your life, right?
Yeah. And because
a Jungian question.
Yeah, it's that kind of stuck with me as well, because
I said something that stuck with you?
The belly button thing's rapidly taking over.
I'm sorry.
Somebody just said that they were going to change their. Let me see here. I am. Oh yeah, right there at the bottom. Terry says, "I'm changing my name to Terry No Belly Button Terry. Terry No Belly Button Terry." I think you could drop one of the Terrys. It could be No Belly Button Terry or Terry No Belly Button.
It sounds like a Garbage Pail Kid name. Remember those cards? The Garbage Pail Kid cards?
Yeah,
Terry No Belly Button Terry. That sounds kind of like a maybe. Yeah, you don't need both of the Terrys, right?
No, double Terry is not going to work. You're just going to have to cut one of those out. But I think No Belly Button Terry is a fantastic name. Terry No Belly Button, it's all right.
Personally, I would go with Pterodactyl. But that's just me. I'm a fan of prehistoric creatures. So
you're a fan of a lot of things that, like,
yes,
are old.
Right. Well, I'm a fan of anything that's like outside of the boring experience, like the mundane experience of daily existence.
Yeah.
Anything that stimulates me or that's kind of odd or primitive or weird, I'm interested in. That's why I never had an interest in very ordinary people. They're just, I mean, all right, You
like cavemen, stuff like that, kind of stuff.
Like they're like interested in their sneakers and their Big Mac, all right, But I like a person that's, been through the ringer, a little odd, interesting way of thinking about things, interesting topics that are off the beaten path. I mean, I love people like that, don't you?
I mean, yeah, yes, I like odd things, I guess, but exactly. The one time I brought up Bigfoot, you and Chris mocked me mercilessly, so I stopped bringing stuff up.
You mean because the cryptozoology is interesting. I have the same attitude I have about the whole ghost thing. It's just interesting. It doesn't mean you believe in it. It's just an interesting topic.
Oh, I believe in Bigfoot.
You mean you actually believe in Bigfoot?
No, not really. I don't know. It's never good when you say something and the doctor goes, "You actually believe that?" So we're gonna leave that there tonight. No, not really.
I mean, I don't understand if you're joking or if you literally believe that there is a Neanderthal-like, kind of humanoid.
Oh, I believe there's Neanderthal humanoids
that is walking around. I mean, I could think of a few people that I wonder sometimes. But I'll
never tell because I'll get mocked. It'll turn into a corn dog, belly button, Bigfoot situation, and.
Hey, listen, you never know. I mean, maybe it's like Men in Black. One day, like in private.
I believe in that too. You'd be surprised, like
and they're all
you're just willing to tell people that you notice belly buttons on angels. I'm not willing to tell people that I believe in Men in Black and aliens help make the pyramids and stuff like that. I'm not willing to.
Listen, I grew up right near the remnants of the World's Fair, the 1964 World's Fair that they used in Men in Black to be the ships that are on top of. I saw those every day of my life, and my whole life I thought those looked like spaceships. Like whoever did that, I was like, exactly. Like everyone thinks that, Yeah, we all thought that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. And Rosie's right. Up in Northern California, Bigfoot's a big deal up here. It really is. There's a whole town dedicated to it, like just up the road a piece.
Is the plural big feet?
Nah.
What do you there's like a pod of whales and a barrel of monkeys and
I've never heard somebody say I saw a bunch of big feets.
But what is the plural of them? Like what we call a group of Bigfoots
I saw a group of Bigfoot.
No, I mean there has to be they're Sasquatches, right? Isn't that the proper term?
Yeah, Sasquatch. Yeah, there's a lot of.
I suppose it would be something like there's always a colorful term for these things, but like my favorite is A Barrel of Monkeys. I love that. School of Fish is also kind of charming, but it has to be one for Sasquatch.
I'll tell you this, and then we'll get out of here. But
Right.
I was in a place called Mill Creek one time, many moons.
Like a Mill Creek in like every state,
probably, but
okay.
But I was in Mill Creek, Northern California. Look it up; it's deep.
Okay.
And I heard, I wasn't the only one. Everybody heard it. That was near us. I heard a bellow. I'm not kidding. And by the way, I was wearing feetsy pajamas too.
I feel so much better now that you're going into the weird.
I know. Look, I can't let you be the only.
Well, it's our Halloween special. What can I tell you? Happy Halloween, Charlie Brown.
I'm telling you, I heard a bellow. It sounded like a T-Rex and a tiger had a baby. It was one of the, and I mean, you could feel the vibration.
This sounds like a date I was on.
Oh, what?
Sounds like a date I went on.
It was probably, one of your ex-girlfriends or something. But I'm just saying, like, it went, I never heard anything like it ever in my life. And never have it again.
Couldn't it have been like a coyote or something?
No, I know what those sound like. I know what wolves sound like. I know what bear sounds like. I mean, like I said, I live in Northern California. We have all kinds of animals like that.
I think it's very interesting. I mean, I'd like to see. Is the idea that there's only one Bigfoot and he's just been like around this whole time, or is the idea that there is a plurality of them? Like, are there many of these big feet?
I don't even know if they exist, man. I'm just telling you what I heard. I've never heard anything like it. And then when I hear Bigfoot experts talk about the sound of Bigfoots, I'm like, that's exactly what I heard.
Do you have a theory that would explain how there could be one of these?
No theories. I crap my pants.
I mean, at least with the idea of the Loch Ness monster, they claim that it's a plesiosaur that was like held over somehow, or they try to find a way to make a scientific thing out of it. But some of those cryptozoological creatures are pretty funny. My favorite is when there's a creature that they thought was fake, and then they discovered that there actually was a creature. Like, for example, when they discovered the oarfish, those huge eel-like kind of fish that could be 60, 70 feet long, they understood what a lot of these sailors were talking about when they would describe this bearded kind of snake-like thing that would swim along the boat. And there were so many accounts that people said, how could it be fake? I mean, are there sea serpents? And then they discovered there really are oarfish that do that. And they have exactly the thing that you see in even early drawings, Renaissance period and later drawings, where they have that colored kind of feather-like thing on the head. Oarfish have those. The other thing, of course, was the giant squid, which everybody said was completely made up until they discovered there really are giant squid, Architeuthis. They really do exist. So, so that's interesting. Remember the coelacanth, the fish that they thought was extinct since prehistoric times, and they found
the Leviathan.
No, a coelacanth is a fish that was only known from the fossil record, and then they found one in the ocean in I think the South Seas, and it turned out there are millions of them. They're not really gone from prehistoric times. So there are interesting things. Listen, I don't.
Well,
judge.
Rachel says, I believe you, Josh. Could you say? I could not. No, I couldn't. But the thing is, I mean, it absolutely happened. I know exactly what happened. There was other people around. I wasn't the only one that heard it. And it was an ungodly sound. I mean, it was so loud that you could feel the vibration.
Were you near a Taco Bell?
No, I wish I was, though.
That might have explained.
I like Taco Bell. It's good.
That might have explained
No, we were in the middle of the woods.
Human sounds, the screeching, oh, okay. All right. Well,
we were in the middle of the woods. It was like, rah! It was insane. It was crazy, dude. I'm getting freaked out just talking about it. But I'll talk about it.
It's a very interesting show, and I think we were obviously trying to have a little fun.
Oh, I had a blast, and I think
pre-Halloween show, and Chris will hopefully join us again for one of these. And I love when we all get together for these. Yep. And Trooper's Mom, Calm Kitty, Dr. Gary has 2,000 books. 2,000? 2,000 is like child's play. I have at least 6.
Yeah, you have enough to start a community library.
Oh yeah, I'm like Burgess Meredith in that Twilight Zone episode.
Did you know?
Stacks and stacks, and I'm like,
I actually
enough at last. Yeah.
I was telling Chris the other day because I was, because you guys are writing a book, or I believe, or something like that. I know you are. And I said, yeah, I've never written a book, but I wrote inside of a book one time, and it was of Mice and Men.
Oh, yeah.
That I had to check out from the library, a class, and then I just wrote at the very beginning that I wrote that George kills Lenny.
I like
Spoiled.
that.
Huh? I
like Mice and Men.
Yeah, I just spoiled it for whoever got the book next. They open it up and they're like, "Oh, great."
You don't have a favorite book? Honestly?
Yeah, I do. I think I read The Shack. I really liked that book. I thought it was a really good book. But I think I don't know. I really enjoy honestly, I really enjoy the Bible. My favorite book in the Bible is Matthew.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My favorite.
Yeah. What's yours?
John.
Oh, really?
That's the contemplative in me.
But I also like the story of Job. I read that.
Sure.
That's a fantastic one.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of wonderful books I can recommend, depending upon what you're interested in. I've read a lot of things, and but
did you ever read The Shack?
No.
Pretty
good.
Good.
Have a copy.
Yeah, I do. Huh?
Send it to me with the microphone.
Yeah, that one I was supposed to send that a year ago. I will actually. That's it. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Gary, I thank you so much.
Evil.
What's that?
I can recommend The New Evil.
By the way, yeah, let's talk about that really quick. The New Evil that is on sale on Amazon. By the way, a fantastic book.
Well, everywhere. You get it anywhere.
You get it anywhere, but the holidays are here. Check it out.
Oh yeah, there's a stocking stuffer for you. Forget about those Pez dispensers.
Here you go. Here's a book about the chronology of mass murder and who's the worst, all the way to 22. You can't wait to get to 22. What is it? Is that the highest level?
Those who have read it, if you like The New Evil, I don't know if like is the right word, but if you enjoyed it, it's very important to review it, because when you review it on Amazon or audio or Audible or Goodreads or whatever, it really helps, put the word out. The higher the stars and the ratings, the more it affects the algorithm. And by the way, I do intend to do. I was going to do a thing with Josh about fictional psychopaths.
Yeah, we need to do that still. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very, very interested in that subject. And by the way, Josh, as we were having our weird conversations, the chat exploded. It's a pretty weird subject too. When you get a chance, read this chat back. They had one long chat trying to wager what our heights are, which is a little strange.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of other weird things. Huh?
Did anybody win?
I don't know if we should tell them. Personally, I would tell them you're a Bigfoot.
I am. I actually have rather small feet.
You're a small foot?
I'm a Littlefoot, dude. That's you remember Littlefoot from Land Before Time?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like kind of I wanted to be Littlefoot. Like we were all my cousins would be like, "Oh, I'm gonna be Sarah, and I'm gonna be whatever Tweety," and I was like, "I'm Littlefoot." All right, it's good talking to you, Dr. Sherry.
Hey, congratulations on graduating from that Brucato Naval Academy.
Absolutely. All right, thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you for everything. You guys are awesome, and we'll see you soon.
Happy Halloween.